Hello and welcome to my Let's Talk F1 2014 Bahrain Grand Prix. In this video we'll be looking at the Bahrain Grand Prix and previewing it by looking back at the Malaysian one, looking why the cars were fast and slow from an aerodynamic point, and a few other things like fuel, tyre wear and setup, and then also previewing the Bahrain Grand Prix by looking over what's happened in FP1 and FP2. Plenty of stuff, including the Red Bulls working a lot on aero to try and catch the Mercs on the high speed straight to Bahrain, and the Mercs really dominating with the colder conditions in Bahrain. So without further ado, let's get into this preview. We're going to start off with Mercedes, who are currently leading the Constructors' Championship. So Mercedes GP, they got a 1-2 with Hamilton coming first and Rosberg in second place in the Malaysian Grand Prix. An absolute dominant race really, and Lewis Hamilton showing that he can do the same thing as Nico Rosberg did in Australia and control the race from the front and come through without really any issues at all. I mean, Hamilton didn't have any issues. I don't think Rosberg did really as well. It was just the fact that Rosberg maybe didn't have a complete all-round good setup. He did say a few things were niggling him, bothering him in the car while he was driving around. So just generally, Hamilton was a lot more comfortable. So that's why he had quite a big lead to his teammate in the same machinery. But, you know, a 1-2 for Mercedes since, I believe, like the Italian Grand Prix of, like, I think it was like 1956 or something like that. Don't quote me on it. I can't exactly remember the exact figure. But Mercedes, by far, up there in a long way. And, you know, the fuel hasn't been an issue for them. I think, apart from Williams, they were the best on fuel usage. We saw in the FOM graphics that they were using the least fuel, apart from Williams, throughout the whole race. I think Hamilton actually had about, I think it was something crazy, like 15% of fuel left over to use in about 6 laps. So the Mercedes working really well. And Mark Hughes, who has been in conjunction with Sky Sports, is going to be doing a quite interesting article in Sky Sports F1 qualifying build-up. So I do recommend you go see that if you can get to it. He's going to do a little segment about why he thinks Red Bull are so dominant. And the main thing is their engine. The fact that their engine basically houses the turbo in a very interesting manner. This is not just for them, it's for every Mercedes engine. But obviously the Mercedes GP team can, you know, work this a lot better, and it's kind of built into the chassis because obviously they make the engine and the car together in pretty much the same place, you know, just a few minutes walk. So they can kind of just literally have the engine kind of part of the car itself, kind of living in it. Basically, the turbo is consisted of two rotating spindles. Essentially, I'm going to try and just simplify this quite greatly. So imagine two rotating spindles and kind of connected with a rod that also spins around. So both are spinning, and so usually this is quite a compact structure, and it's at one end of the car, and the exhaust gases go in to the one end of the turbo, spin it up, and the other end spins as well, and it kind of just basically allows all the air to be compressed even more and get a lot faster and a lot hotter, and allows the engine to just pump out a lot more energy out of the system in a simple terms. So Mercedes, what they've done is they cheekily didn't say this when they announced their engine, in a video. But what their turbo actually looks like for all Mercedes engine cars is the rod between the two spindles is actually very long. And, you know, the V6 engine, obviously, it's called a V6 because it's V-shaped. And the rod goes through the middle of that V shape. And the two spindles are on either end. This means it's a lot less hotter. The parts are not getting as hot because it's being spread all the way down that long turbo tube. And this is actually allowing them to get the cooling on the turbo a lot better. And it's not overheating. And they can stress the turbo a lot more. And that's how they're able to get a lot more power out of it and just use it a lot more efficiently and not have to worry about overheating issues. We saw the Williams cars, surprisingly, even though they're using a Mercedes engine, they were overheating a tad, but the Red Bulls, obviously at the beginning of the season, they had a big issue. They've started to sort it, but I guess they're still running with a bit more kind of hotter temperatures because the Mercedes car really, there's no talk about them having turbo issues at all. So they're really on top of things. Looking at Malaysia and, not Malaysia, sorry, looking at Bahrain and what they've brought to the car, there's not actually too much Mercedes are bringing to the car that I can see directly on the TV, and even Sky Sports didn't really cover anything about Mercedes too much. What I can say is they're very good at Bahrain. Bahrain is a track where it's all about the traction zone. zones and getting the engine accelerated up. It's not about overall downforce. There are some high-speed corners there, but the major part of the time found around this track is getting out those really tough traction zones and gaining the speed very rapidly down the straights. You know, you have two main straights, the back one and the pit straight. But you also have quite a few little straights here and there leading up to long, wide, sweeping corners. And that all is about traction, especially places like Turn 2, where you're turning through the corner and you're still in the traction phase. Getting traction down, but also getting the power down as fast as you can is a good thing the Mercedes engines as a whole will really capitalise on. But because the Mercedes car works team has the most downforce of any of the Mercedes cars, they can really use this as an advantage. And in FP2, we saw times that were very, very close. We're talking about a tenth off the 2013 times in FP2. Now, obviously, with cooler conditions and, you know, just different kind of conditions on the day, you never know. In F1, it's all about the conditions in that place in time, that place in history, on the day, that year. But, you know, we just do a loose comparison. It's very impressive that they're able to do those sort of lap times and use so much less fuel in the car. So, very, very impressive from all the teams, but mostly Mercedes for getting really that close to last year's FP2 times. But Mercedes looking very strong indeed. I think Hamilton is going to be very strong in this race because he can lean on the tyres a lot more because the cooler conditions will not make the tyres overheat like we saw in 2013. And at the moment, I think my money's on Hamilton, but something just tells me that Rosberg is also going to come into play with the strategy. But that's been Mercedes. Let's move on to Red Bull. Now, Red Bull Racing had a mixed bag again for this race, with Sebastian Vettel getting a third place, a brilliant podium I might add, because that car really isn't outrightly fast enough to get a podium. It's still got a few issues here and there, especially the engine is very down on power. I think they say there's about probably a 6 to 7 kilometers per hour difference on the straights, but Vettel brilliantly did get up to third place. A DNF for Ricciardo after a few calamities with the pit crew, and also the bonding of his front wing came off, which was very unfortunate. Red Bull are confident that won't happen at Bahrain, but after Bahrain they are going to be thinking about revisiting the kind of bonding they use, because it simply came off when Ricciardo went over a curb. But Red Bull's aero is definitely the best still. Malaysia brought up this because Malaysia is all about the downforce through the high speed. It's less about the engines. That's why Red Bull were able to close up, and Vettel was actually able to kind of give Rosberg a bit of pressure at a few points in the race, because it's all about the aero work and less about the engine in Malaysia. The high-speed corners, Red Bull were right there. If I think Sky Sports did an interesting thing where they said in Sector 2, if the time of Mercedes is 100%, then you know, we'll talk about all the teams from that 100%. So Red Bull was 100.3, I think, percent off Mercedes, so that's 0.3% off Mercedes time in Sector 2, showing that Red Bull are gaining back any kind of you know, slowness from no, that's not a word, but never mind, from the engine by having good aero through those high-speed corners. And, you know, they really benefited. Vettel really got up there in third place. Good stuff. Ricciardo seemed very hungry to get up there into the mix of the top guys. Very good. Now moving on to Bahrain and what Red Bull's developing. So Red Bull had some interesting developments in FP1 and FP2 at Bahrain, and the main points were, firstly, they developed their brake ducts, and Teddy Kravitz noticed some few flicks on the brake ducts. As you can see in the picture at the moment, you can see those two different structures, carbon fiber structures coming out and simply flicking. Now, this is very clever from Red Bull. They're really utilising any bit of the car they can use. Brake ducts, not even used aerodynamically, but they're going to be, but Red Bull are using them aerodynamically, and essentially any air that comes off the front wing that's coming towards the rest of the car, going towards the side pod inlet. These little flicks, I'm going to guess, are going to try and channel air sideways, because the flick kind of, you know, inverts right, so that's going to flick it kind of outwards towards the side of the side pod. So that just helps air kind of get round the really smooth side pods of this Red Bull. We know Red Bull have tightly packaged that, so that's really going to help them. But one of the most interesting developments I thought was in FB2, Sky Sports noted that they had taken off the main kind of big chunk of aero flicks from the top of the rear wing. Not rear wing, sorry, front wing. If you look at the picture now, this is the Malaysian Grand Prix spec. As you can see, we've zoomed into the front wing, and you can see that there's a big, you know, chunk on top, right on top of the front wing, of a whole load of flicks, a whole load of inlets that are kind of channeling air through, and then underneath you can see an array of just simply wings sticking out and being curved a bit. So now we're looking at a picture that I've been able to take off my phone. Unfortunately, I couldn't get any pictures straight away off the internet as soon as FP2 was finished. But, you know, it's still good enough to see what I mean. As you can see, there's no kind of above structure. There's a tiny little panel, but it's really not that much. And you can see it's kind of stripped back, and that means there's a lot less drag from the Red Bull car. And they're developing this for Bahrain, and it will be used at places like China, Spa. They've basically done this like they did last year. In Spa, if you remember last year, they had a very skinny rear wing, very skinny front wing, but yet they were still able to have enough downforce and were able to challenge in the high-speed straights. Now, Red Bull's high speed has never been a good factor of their car. They've always gained back the time and downforce. But this year, because at Bahrain, especially tracks like Bahrain, China, Spa, Monza, you know, the engine speed is so important. And Red Bull are already down on that. So adding even more drag from the aerodynamic parts is going to make that even worse. So they're taking this front bit off the front wing, the top bit, and basically just reducing drag. And because Red Bull's aero is so good anyway, it's enough aero, there's enough aero there that the time they're gaining from taking off this stuff and reducing the drag is more than the time lost by taking it off, because the downforce is still good enough from these main bits. And I think they should be running this at for the Grand Prix and qualifying. I'll be surprised if they weren't, because they did run with this system the whole of FP2, so I'd be very surprised if you saw them change it. If they do, then maybe it didn't work as well as I thought, but in FP2 they did look quite good. So that's been a major development for Red Bull there. They did develop the front of the rear wing at Malaysia. I didn't actually get to note it down because it was very late. No one really was reporting on it, but from the F1 site we've got a little drawing of Red Bull developing their rear wing. They've got a lot more slits in the rear wing that allow air to channel down towards the diffuser, make it work harder. Like Ferrari had, it just makes it work a lot harder. But yeah, that's been Red Bull's main aero thing. Really, honestly, for this video, the biggest segment is the Red Bull car. A lot of development here for Red Bull. They're trying to make leaps and bounds to try and catch the dominant Mercedes team, which at the moment is still improving a possible task, because they look mighty good in FP2. A lot of grip there and a lot of confidence from both drivers, Lewis Hamilton and Nico Rosberg. Now moving on to McLaren. So McLaren had quite a, well, I guess they could say negative race in Malaysia from their Australia race. We saw Jenson Button come home in 6th place and Kevin Magnussen in 9th after Magnussen clipped Raikkonen, which got him a penalty, a drive-through, and then 2 points on his super license. I thought the penalty was actually quite harsh, because if you look at the replay back, you know, I know I'm going to offend some Kimi fans here, but I've, you know, read from other forums that Kimi fans are actually agreeing with me, that Kimi actually went wide and then came back and kind of cut Magnussen off. And of course, maybe a more experienced driver could have seen that, would have backed out. So I think Kimi was maybe a bit harsh on Magnussen, kind of being a bit cheeky and being, all right, he's a rookie, he won't know, like, you know, to kind of back off, but it kind of bit him in the back anyway with the puncher. Not saying he did that deliberately, but it was a bit harsh penalty all round, I felt. But the McLaren car really didn't work in Malaysia, because the high-speed circuit nature, you need a lot of downforce, and at the moment McLaren don't have that. They brought some upgrades in terms of their nose, and Eric Boullier did note that the nose did actually help their downforce. It did, but the fact is it just wasn't enough for McLaren to make the leap they wanted to before the weekend. The high-speed corners really did not suit McLaren's lack of downforce, but going to Bahrain, where it's all about traction, as I said, about getting the power down with the engine, the Mercedes engine, the McLaren will help them. Also, being there's a few more low-speed corners which McLaren are really solid on. As I noted before in my previous Let's Talk, the suspension arms on the front are basically parallel to the ground, which means they can get a large contact patch onto the ground, which helps them in low-speed corners. And well, it showed an FP2. Button, I believe, was in 6th on the outright quali pace, which is roughly about where the overall car was in Australia. So hopefully, obviously, we'll be getting a dry quali, so we can probably know for sure what the pace of the McLaren car is. But I think at Bahrain they'll do a lot better, and I think they may be close to a podium. I think the actual podium may be quite tricky because you've got the likes of Alonso, who's doing quite well at Bahrain so far, and the Red Bulls coming back up there. But I think there's a chance for Button and Magnussen to get some good points. No major updates at Bahrain that visually there, although Sky Sports head graphics did note that McLaren did say they brought some upgrades, and that it is it is a step forward, but it's maybe not the major step that it needs. And that's quite a big trend between most teams apart from Mercedes and Red Bull. The steps they're making from now to Bahrain are not massive, and that even at China, that's when we'll maybe see a few more upgrades, because we've got a bit of a gap till the Chinese Grand Prix to develop. So that's been McLaren. Let's move on to Williams. So Williams had an okay race, quite mediocre maybe from where they wanted to be. 7th place Massa and 8th place Bottas. The biggest talking point was obviously the team orders, and I myself am quite happy that Massa didn't obey them and he ignored them, because of the psychological battering he got from Alonso and the whole, he's faster than you. For Williams engineers to say the exact same words, basically, apart from the word Bottas instead of Alonso, must have really hurt him inside, and I'm quite glad he stood his ground there. And Williams have come out and said they were wrong to do it. Susie Wolf in the Sky Sports commentary box for FP2 did say also she believes it was the wrong thing. Claire Williams has also said it was the wrong thing, and Massa has confirmed that the team thought it was the wrong thing afterwards, and they should just let them race. And Williams has always had this ethos about letting people race, so it really was a kind of poor judgment from Williams, and also the engineers to word it in that quite kind of weird resonating way to Massa. But moving on, they had an okay race. The engine was working well as it should do, but they just didn't have the overall pace to really gain even more points. Bottas was coming through the field quite well, so who would have we don't know what would have happened if he did overtake Massa and he was let through. I'm not too sure he would have overtaken Button. I think Button was about 2 seconds ahead at the highest point of the gap, so I think it would have been fine. Moving on to Bahrain, we saw Williams really not going out for nearly all of FP1 and FP2. They did, I think, more FP1 running than FP2, but even so, because Williams did the most testing at Bahrain. They got the most miles under their belts here at the Bahrain tests. They know they have a good setup for Bahrain, so really they didn't need to stress their car, because they had overheating issues at Malaysia, and sources have told us that Williams aren't changing their engine from practice to qualifying. So the engine they're using for FP2 right now, as it just finished in Bahrain, is going to be the same engine they're going to be using in qualifying and the race. So they're not using a practice engine like maybe some other teams are. So Williams, because they've got a good setup already, they know the car's going to be relatively good. They know the race pace is there because of the testing miles they did. They're confident of just resting the car essentially and just letting it cool down, not stressing it out, because I believe after Bahrain, I'm going to guess they're maybe going to replace the engine and swap it for their next one in line, or maybe even carry on to China. We'll have to see. But if their overheating issues hit back in Bahrain, it will be tough. But the cooler conditions also should help them out there. And with tyre wear not being, I don't think it will be a major factor, because actually we've noted in FP2 that the option tyre can go as long as the prime tyre, and the option tyre is the quicker tyre, maybe about 2 seconds in the first few stages of the stint, and then probably about half a tenth to 7/10 faster than the prime. So I think we'll see maybe some teams starting on prime tyres to get rid of the prime tyre and going on option for 3 stops. So I think maybe it might be worth for Williams to do that with one of their cars. Split strategy, I think it maybe could work for them. They were looking very solid around Bahrain in testing, so I think it might be a good weekend for them. So let's move on to, I think we're going to move on to Ferrari. Ferrari had an alright race, another one like Red Bull, split with Alonso 4th place, good job for him, and 12th place Raikkonen after he got that puncher from Magnussen. The car really is on pace for top 4, and Alonso has said that he's banking on getting upgrades at China to really step it up. He was hampered by Nico Hülkenberg, had some really nice battles with him at the end of the Malaysian Grand Prix. Ultimately, Ferrari doesn't have the overall pace, it's lacking some downforce, and that was seen in Malaysia, but Alonso still did a great job to drag the car up to 4th place. So moving on to Bahrain, FP2, Alonso was putting in some good lap times. Kimi was having a few issues in FP1 with the brake-by-wire system. He went straight on at turn 1, I think in FP2, I think it was, sorry. So he was having some issues with maybe the brake-by-wire, maybe it's just the tyres weren't working well, the brakes weren't working well, just mechanically, and it wasn't an issue of him working with them. But we'll have to see how Kimi is doing. At the moment, it does look like he's struggling with the Ferrari at the moment. No major upgrades for Ferrari. As I just said, Alonso is banking on upgrades for China because he said there are no major upgrades coming for Bahrain. Only probably a few little things here and there that are not even worth looking at. So that's been Ferrari. Quite a quick update. So it just shows that maybe they're struggling a bit for this Bahrain Grand Prix. I still think they'll do okay, but Bahrain is one of the fuel-heavy tracks, so maybe with that thirstier Ferrari engine, they'll be struggling to maybe get higher than maybe 5th. We'll have to see, really. So moving on to the next team, Force India. Force India's last race was okay, with Hulkenberg getting 5th place. Again, dragging the car up. I say this time and time again, and lots of people say it's time and time again. Hulkenberg just managed to take whatever car he's put in up to the front at some point in the season, and consistently now. In the 5th place with the Force India, he said he was very happy at the beginning of Bahrain to be battling with Ferraris in the previous race. A DNF for Perez after some major issues at the start of the race, unfortunate of him. Perez saying he's not been enjoying the new formula. But Hulkenberg looking good. And for Bahrain, you know, Force India looked okay. I think there was a stewards inquiry between Perez and Rosberg in FP2. We'll have to see what comes of that. I don't think there will be any sort of penalties. I don't believe there are usually penalties given for practice incidents. But the car looked okay overall. Again, no kind of major talking points in terms of aero. Again, you know, it's a bit frustrating that the news teams don't really cover every single team in terms of aero. They just look at the big teams, I guess, because, you know, they're the ones we all look at. But Force India, again, I think Hulkenberg will have another strong weekend dragging the car up. And, you know, with cooler conditions, we may see Hulkenberg yet again do some crazy strategy and go one less stop than everyone else and pull the car up. So we'll have to see about that. So now moving on to Toro Rosso. Toro Rosso, a mixed weekend again, like most teams at Malaysia. We got Kvyat in 10th place, getting his 2nd consecutive points position finish. Very impressed with Kvyat. He's doing well in that Toro Rosso to get consistent points. Verne DNFs with a, I think it was a problem with his engine, I think it was, don't quote me on that. But Kvyat continuing to impress, very good stuff. The Toro Rosso, no major updates for Bahrain, but I suspect Kvyat, I'm going to tip him for another points finish. I think he's doing really well, he is, and you know, it's just, you know, it's a great job in a Toro Rosso that is clearly not right up there, and he's not, you know, he's having to do some work to really get it up there. But, you know, you've got to finish the races, and he's finishing them, not getting any incidents, and he's doing well for a rookie from GP3. So, very impressed with him so far. But as I just said, no major stuff for Bahrain. Yet again, you know, the news teams don't really forecast anything. But to be honest, all these lower teams don't really have the budget to increase aero every single circuit. You get, you know, situations like I just said with Ferrari, where they wait till a certain race to bring updates. I suspect all the teams will bring updates to the Spanish Grand Prix, the first European race, so watch out for that Let's Talk. I bet that will be a long one with a lot of aero updates. So now, moving on to Lotus. So Lotus's Romain Grosjean got a surprising 11th place. He finished the race. He got 11th place. Very good for the Frenchman, whose car is really quite a dog and just doesn't want to finish, and is very poor in reliability. And they're running on about, I think, about 3/4 of the power they have. So Grosjean doing well to get 11th place there, finishing the race. DNF for Maldonado. So Grosjean doing well, and there's actually some interesting stuff they've brought to Bahrain. So let's look at the Bahrain updates for Lotus. So what you're going to be seeing now are pictures of the Lotus nose and the twin tusks. So they've got that nice big gap in between the tusks. And what they've got now is they've got a carbon fibre floor kind of coming off the tusks. Kind of off the bodywork of the rest of the car. And they've got these vertical slits meeting this floor, and that's basically splitting air and getting it to the rest of the car. Obviously, most cars have these carbon fiber kind of wings that come down and bend left and right, and so this structure will help air get through to the bottom of the car. So it's good to know that Lotus, even though they're still trying to work on reliability, and that's the main thing, they are still bringing parts to make it go faster as a kind of just a you know, fast racing car. So, you know, once they get on top of this car may be pretty decent. We'll have to see, but that's been the major update for Lotus. Some, you know, nice to see they're still looking at aero stuff and not just kind of drowning in misery of the engine not really working too well. So now moving on to Sauber. Sauber, an absolutely terrible weekend. Double DNF for Sauber. Calamities, really. This Sauber team is really drowning. At Bahrain now, we've learned that the Sauber car is horribly overweight, and that Adrian Sutil will be going without a drinks bottle for the whole of the Bahrain race, which is absolutely shocking. And the fact that a heavier driver in Sutil and also a heavier car is having to save weight by not drinking during the race. And you know, do comment this below. Do you think something like that is correct? You know, should drivers be, you know, basically, you know, falling, you know, into kind of dehydration zones to try and finish the race and be competitive? The Sauber is overweight already, so, you know, they're not going to do well anyway, and the Sauber really doesn't have any downforce through turn 2. They're really fighting the car a lot. The Sauber not doing well in Malaysia, and I really suspect it's going to be the same story for Bahrain. Unfortunately, the car is simply nowhere at this point in time. So now moving on to Marussia. So the Marussia cars of Chilton and Bianchi mixed. Again, a lot of teams are quite kind of split on Malaysia. DNF Bianchi and 15th place for Chilton. Chilton was actually only, like, I think a 10th off 14th place Ericsson in the Caterham. So another decent weekend for Marussia. They're, you know, getting one car across the line was good. Bianchi unfortunate to not finish, and at this point in time Chilton is doing a better job than Bianchi in terms of just he's having good luck with the car and bringing home the car. So I think you know, even though a lot of the F1 community joke about Max Chilton, at least he's finishing these races, and that's actually quite a good thing for this season, that they're just getting the reliability under their belts and they're constantly just reaffirming themselves as finishing the race, because you never know, at some point they may you know, finishing the race may be a crucial thing for them. So now moving on to Caterham. So the last F1 team I'm covering, and a 13th place for Kobayashi and a 14th place for Ericsson. Impressive stuff, I must add. You know, the Caterham's doing really well here to get 13th and 14th. And 13th place here in Malaysia may be proved crucial, because this will override the 13th place from Chilton in the Australian Grand Prix. So it's all about how high they finish if they don't get a point. So Caterham doing a good job. And actually, I forgot to add in the Let's Talk Malaysia. I didn't actually pick this up because I didn't see the pictures properly. Caterham have actually revise their kind of front of the car. As you can just see on the picture, you'll see in Kobayashi's car, or I think that's Ericsson actually, the top Caterham, you'll see that the chassis curves down. So they got an actual stepped chassis like we saw last year, like 2012. They've got a stepped nose, but then it kind of stops, and then they've got that kind of long kind of finger antenna that goes to the front wing, the black antenna. So they've sort of lowered the actual chassis, so that before they had a very high chassis and then the pole going very long down to the front wing. So now they've kind of extended the chassis down a bit and curved it down. So I'm not too sure if it just wasn't getting enough aero, and they're trying to develop it a bit more, but just an interesting thing. Bahrain, again, no major developments we've seen, but they're horribly off the pace. Kobayashi's FP1 time was slower than a Caterham GP2 FP1 time. So Kobayashi's prediction at the beginning of the season that he would have been faster in a Caterham GP2 car is actually true for FP1. So yeah, have at that what you will. Do comment below any of your thoughts that you've had about any of the stuff I've said, any comments you want to make about Sutil, and what you think what's going to happen this weekend. Obviously, now I'm going to get into my predictions, and that's where we can discuss some things. So here we come to the actual predictions of this video for the Bahrain Grand Prix. My top 3 predictions are Lewis Hamilton, Nico Rosberg and Sebastian Vettel. You'll note it's the same as the Malaysian one. I think the 2 Mercedes are definitely 1 and 2. I think Hamilton, looking at FP2, I think he really had some good grip and pace around the lap. And, you know, I was thinking Rosberg for the weekend, but looking at that practice sessions, you know, Hamilton just looked on it, so I just think he might have the edge, and just in terms of overall pace on Nico Rosberg this weekend, but we never know about the strategy plays into it. But for now, I'm going with Hamilton and Rosberg, and third, Sebastian Vettel, because I think the Red Bull car is pretty much there. It's probably the second fastest car, and I think Vettel is going to do well. I think he's got to get third place, I think. I really can't see the McLaren's really going for it, because the McLaren sort of dropped back behind the Red Bull in aero aspects, and I don't see the Ferraris getting there. So and the Williams also don't look to be absolute podium contenders, so I don't think we'll be able to put that in. But for the rest of my top 10 predictions, so Lewis Hamilton first, Nico Rosberg second, Sebastian Vettel third, fourth place Kevin Magnussen, fifth place Fernando Alonso, sixth place Nico Hulkenberg, seventh place Jenson Button, eighth place Valtteri Bottas, ninth place Kimi Raikkonen, and 10th place Danny Kvyat. And pole position Lewis Hamilton, fastest lap Nico Rosberg, and positions gained Daniel Ricciardo. But I think Ricciardo is only going to finish in 11th place because with his 10 place grid penalty for an unsafe release, I think he's going to struggle to make it through the fields. I just have a feeling he won't get 10th place. And also, to be honest, it's very hard to squeeze so many drivers into 10 positions because there are so many different variables in this championship that I really can't predict it this year. But I'm pretty sure the top 3 will consist of 2 Mercs and the Sebastian Vettel Red Bull. I really don't see anyone else getting 3rd place apart from Vettel unless he has issues or someone seriously outperforms. So that's been my predictions, and that's been Let's Talk F1 2014 Bahrain Grand Prix. Please do leave a massive like if you did enjoy it. Comment below on what you thought of the video. Did you enjoy all the aerodynamic talk? Do tell me if you're understanding all of it, or do I need to simplify even more, because I do know I'm quite nerdy when it comes to that. And also do comment below your top 10 predictions and your top 3 and who you think will surprise. Do you think the Bahrain Grand Prix at night is going to be a good spectacle? We've seen pictures at FP2. It does look pretty stunning. So do comment below your predictions. Remember to give it a like if you enjoyed it. Comment below what you thought of the whole video in general. Hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day. I've been aarava, and I will see you guys next time. Hope you enjoyed the Bahrain Grand Prix.